My special guest tonight is Dr. Melina Abdullah. She is the co-founder of the LA chapter of Black Lives Matter. She is also Dr. Cornel West's running mate for 2024. Let's go ahead and bring her in. Welcome, Dr. Abdullah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Sister Sabrina. I'm glad to be with you.
Great to see you. So I guess this is interesting. We're having this interview right after the debates last night. First and foremost, I think I want to start with that. Did you get the opportunity to watch the debates last night? And if so, how do you feel about it? And what do you think this means for those that are running third party or independent?
I watched every single second of the debate last night, and I'm still trying to figure out what's a black job. Is this a black Is this a black job? Maybe it's a black job. I don't know what's a black job. Somebody posted on the Twitter feed, it's a cha-cha slide instructor is a black job. It's a black job. There's this whole list of possible black jobs, right? Anyway, for people who missed it, that's one of the things Evil Incarnate said, that, you know, the people of color immigrants are going to come for black jobs, right? So the question becomes, what is a black job, right?
I know it was definitely interesting. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. So you are Dr. West's running mate for 2024. I'm curious because you do have an interesting background. I know you co-founded the LA Black Lives Matter chapter. I'll get into that a little bit later. But now you are Dr. West's running mate. So I'm curious, what made you want to pursue politics? Because I know you come from an activist background.
I did not want to pursue politics. So I'm co-founder of both Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, which is the first chapter of Black Lives Matter, as well as Black Lives Matter Grassroots, which is the assembly of 33 chapters around the country, and have been a Black Lives Matter organizer since our inception in 2013. That's not my paid job. My paid job is I'm a professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA, and have been deeply, deeply influenced by Dr. West in his intellectual work, right? So his intellectual work fed me, is really part of the reason I'm a professor of Pan-African Studies. And I've been following him. And when he announced that he was running for president, I became a very enthusiastic supporter and was content to be that, and actually just interviewed him on one of my radio programs, and thought that when I received a call from him and his beautiful wife, Anahita, I thought they were calling to debrief the interview, and had no idea that they would invite me to be his running mate. But it's one of the greatest honors of my entire life.
How are you feeling about what it's like to be a part of an independent campaign? I think one of the issues that all the third party and independent candidates are running into is the ballot access. And we've seen a number of instances where either the DNC or the Democratic Party is trying to sue people like Jill Stein, people like RFK. I believe I just saw a memo that now they're trying to prevent Dr. West from being on the ballot in North Carolina. How do you feel about that?
So the Democratic Party is proving how untrue to their name they are, right? So they're absolutely anti-democratic. Democrat means, my training is as a political scientist, right, is rule by the people. And what they're doing is trying to prevent the people from being able to make their own choices. So it's absolutely a duopoly. It's the Democratic Party and the Republican Party trying to shut out anyone else that gives any kind of choice, that gives any kind of vision, that really disrupts this model where both of these parties basically cape for corporate interests. And, you know, we're a party of the people. And so they're using every trick in the book to try to block us from being on ballots. But we just had a really beautiful call. I'm coming over from the Zoom with the Justice for All Party in North Carolina, and they are committed to struggling forward. And we will continue to struggle to get on as many ballots as possible. Some of those may have to be write-in campaigns, but we are working to make sure that we disrupt the duopoly.
I also saw that Dr. West does now have ballot access in Michigan, which is one of the swing states. Have you had a chance to go to Michigan, and what are you hearing from voters, particularly those that are part of this uncommitted campaign towards Joe Biden? Do you feel that some of those voters are going to show up in 2024, but show up to support third party and independent candidates?
Absolutely. So to be clear, we've collected, I think, double the number of signatures required to be on the ballot in Michigan. But the way that the rules are set up, they allow the Democrats and Republicans to have their conventions first, and then if they want to challenge our ballot access. So we're not officially on the ballot, although we have qualified. We have more than enough Michiganians, I heard is the best term to use, Michiganians, to get us on the ballot. So my impression of what's happening in Michigan is people are just tired of this false choice. And especially in states like Michigan, where you have a significant number of Muslims, and I'm also of the Muslim faith, right? That they're refusing to choose between a genocide and a Muslim ban. And so they're saying, blatantly, they're saying that we'll vote uncommitted before we vote for Trump or Biden. And now with a third party option, they prefer to vote. I always say, vote your vision, not your fear. And so they're choosing, I think a huge number of them will vote their vision.
That would be great to see. I recently had a conversation with Claire Daly. She's a politician from Ireland. She's in the EU. She just lost her reelection. And one of the things that she did tell me is that, unfortunately, a lot of the voters that are, pro-Palestinian, just like Claire is, when it came time to vote, they just didn't show up. She said a lot of the younger voters didn't show up. What efforts is the campaign doing to try to mobilize young voters?
Sure. So part of it is just organic, right? So part of the reason why I still have on a t-shirt is because right before the Zoom that I had before you, I was at a protest, right? And you lifted up that I am an outside organizer. I'm used to being on the front lines of protest. And so much of it is organic. Much of it is we are in the streets. Some of you have seen the video of Dr. West, even at 71 years old, hopping a fence to join the demonstrators on the campus of Columbia, right, just before the end of the academic year, right? We're used to standing up for what we believe in, and I think that young people are the most courageous in doing that. And so if they can see a piece of that in us, I think organically it motivates them as new voters. I have two of them myself. My oldest children are 20 and 17. They'll vote for the first time in a presidential election in November. And, I think that's part of what they're committed to, right? So until we were running, neither my oldest Tandiwe or Amara intended to vote for either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. But now we give them someone to vote for, and they're friends as well. And so I think that's what we're doing around young voters. And of course, trying to consciously engage them and let them know it's a heavy lift to share with folks about our candidacy, because in addition to the duopoly, there's also mainstream media that almost is a third partner in that duopoly and only giving voice to Dems and Republicans rather than lifting up third parties or allowing the third party to ever have the mic passed.
Are you starting to notice that more younger voters tend to be less willing to participate in the duopoly? I started to notice that. I think it was, I want to say, oh, maybe not 2020. I think it was during the midterms for 2022. I started to hear more rumblings from younger people saying that, no, I don't want to support any of these, the local politicians, people that were running for the congressional races. They were feeling like this was really a lost cause. I noticed that they were also calling out the Biden administration for not trying to codify Roe v. Wade into law. So they're very much aware that, yes, Donald Trump put the Supreme Court justices in place to overturn Roe v. Wade, but they were also aware that the Democratic Party, these politicians have had years to codify Roe v. Wade into law, and they chose not to. Are you noticing a difference with the younger voters in particular?
Young voters are much more audacious and courageous than sometimes older voters. A lot of older voters like to speak in terms of what they think that they can get, right? And so they start there. What can we possibly get? Well, we don't want, the embodiment of evil, so they resign themselves to their fear. But what I'm seeing with younger voters and younger people, and I've been really, really fortunate as a Black Lives Matter organizer to be in the midst of lots of young people, especially here in LA, who did things like, when we defunded LAPD by $250 million, they defunded LA school police by 35% and completely removed them from their campuses. They have police-free schools, right? And when we're applauding them, they say, you can applaud us now, but we're not stopping until we get all of it. We want all of it. We don't want just this. They want $100 million investment in something called the Black Student Achievement Plan. And it's $100 million annually into the Black Student Achievement Plan, which has been life-changing for students, including my own children. But they're saying that's nowhere near enough. And so I think that you see this kind of audacity constantly from our young people. And what this moment, this Free Palestine movement moment, has taught us is to sometimes step back and follow the leads of our young people, because they'll get us further down a road than some folks who are older folks, often who are tethered to what we've always had.
Speaking of Israel and Palestine, so this has become, I think, the biggest issue of this election, although you wouldn't think that judging from the debate last night. But I think this is like a big issue for a lot of voters. How do you feel about what's happening in Gaza? And do you feel that Israel, particularly, I guess, Netanyahu's administration, do you feel that he's on his way out?
So those are heavy questions. I can start with the last one first. I pray that Netanyahu is on his way out in one way or another. You're even finding justice-loving folks inside wanting to get rid of him. You're seeing a world community wanting to charge him with war crimes, right? You're seeing that. And I think that's the way in which the global community, and especially, and I'm going to be specific, Black folks and Muslims around the world are rising up, is really, really beautiful and powerful. Now, how do I feel? I cry almost every single day. So my oldest child, who I keep talking about, it's like the show is about Tandiwe. I was driving them somewhere this morning and they brought up Hind. And I can't talk about her without crying. I can't look at these numbers. We're at about 50,000 bodies found so far in this iteration of genocide. And that's estimated to be about half of the people who were actually killed, because that count is based on bodies discovered, not bodies buried under the rubble. Half of those people killed are babies, are children. And that doesn't include what's happened to these children who survived and are now orphaned, who are now caring for their younger siblings, who are so traumatized they can't speak, who are missing limbs. It doesn't account for any of that. This is going to be generations and generations of trauma and pain and hurt, and that's if it stops right now. And so I think part of what has pushed me into this area of struggle into electoral politics more fully is that we can't just sit by, and whatever it takes, if we said, like I've said, I would never, ever, ever run for office, right? If that's what I'm called into, if that's going to help, and I pray it does help, then that's what we have to do. But all of us, mamas and babas and sisters and brothers and siblings and just people who are human beings and value human life, we have to put it on the line for our beautiful, beautiful humanity in Palestine.
I agree. Yeah, the images are very hard to see. I did listen to the audio. I saw it on Twitter. There was audio from Hind, and that was really hard to listen to, the last audio before she was killed. I want to pivot to Black Lives Matter, because I think that, like, there's a lot of discussion about Black Lives Matter, and I tend to notice that a lot of the criticism towards Black Lives Matter applies to Black Lives Matter, like, global network. But then there's also Black Lives Matter grassroots. And something that you brought up earlier in the interview is that it actually started with Black Lives Matter grassroots. And I think not everyone may be aware of that. What do you think happened there with Black Lives Matter, that global network group that started? Because as I understand, you sued them, you had a lawsuit against them. What do you feel they did that, you know, basically made the grassroots effort look bad in a way?
Basically, there were some, I'm going to call it like I see it, because that's what I do. There was a band of thieves who saw money and came in when people were extremely generous, especially in 2020, and money finally poured into Black Lives Matter. Now, we had spent 7 years on the ground building, right, with virtually no money. But money poured into Black Lives Matter in 2020 after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. And there were some highly paid consultants who were given positions of power within the Global Network Foundation, which none of us had any relationship with, not direct relationship with or control over. Unfortunately, one of our co-founders made it so that the consultants had legal control, apparently, and they were able to steal the vast majority of the money, the platforms, and the good name of Black Lives Matter. So now if you look at the platform, so I used to be able to post on our Instagram. I was the main one doing our posts up through 2021. And it would be protests, and it would be lives from, you know, the Dante Wright trial, or it would be, you know, Black women are divine, and it would be kind of what we were moving. And now if you look at it, they're really highly produced posts that look like talking points from the Democratic Party. And we asked for them to give our stuff back. We spent about 6 months trying to negotiate to get our money, our platforms, and our good name back. They refused, and we wound up filing a lawsuit. And because they have more money than us, they were able to hire, I think it's the same attorney as Hillary Clinton, who used a fancy maneuver called an anti-SLAPP motion, and they blocked us from even being able to present the evidence in court. And we do have evidence, including a memorandum of understanding saying that the resources are supposed to go to Black Lives Matter grassroots, not this highly paid consultant who then hired on 2 of his friends so they could share in the ill-gotten gains.
And they bought houses. And one of the things that I noticed during the BLM protests is, like, I felt like, number one, that was one of the biggest movements that we had in this country. And also it was the global movement too. There were protests happening all over the world, similar to what you see right now with Gaza. But one of the things that came to my attention is that it seemed like to me, after Donald Trump lost re-election and Joe Biden won, and it was announced that Joe Biden won, a lot of the protesters went home. And that's one of the criticisms I still have today, like as if people all of a sudden thought that police brutality wasn't going to be an issue because a Democrat just won the presidential election. And that made me wonder, was there some type of disconnect there? Why do you think that happened?
So to be honest, a couple of things happened. One, some people did go home, right? Some people went home because they thought it would be better under Biden. I don't know. But some people went home because the lockdown was over and they had to go back to work or school, right? But there's also people overlook the fact that when our platforms are stolen and when mass media refuses to cover us, when they turn their head, they're missing the fact that we have been in the streets for 177 weeks now, every single Wednesday, protesting the police associations, which pretend to be unions, right? That we still have 33 chapters and just finished onboarding 7 new chapters. So that's the most Black Lives Matter chapters that have ever existed. If we study movement, we know that there's ebbs and flows in movement. You cannot sustain one of the largest marches that we had in Los Angeles and really around the world. We had hundreds of thousands of people on the streets of Hollywood, right? We did a big protest with YG and it was hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. That's not going to happen every single day. That's not going to be able to continue. There's going to be moments of uprising, of mass uprising, and then most of those folks are going to have to go back to work and school. But the movement isn't done just because there's now 100 people instead of 100,000 people in the streets.
What do you think when you look at Black Lives Matter, a global network? Number one, have you had the opportunity to talk to any of those individuals, the ones that kind of made it, like Tamika Mallory? Have you had an opportunity to talk to any of them? I would say within like the past 2 years.
You're saying any of the ones who did what? Who
stole
people like,
or people like Tamika Mallory? Like, have you had the opportunity to talk to them within like the past 2 years?
So we should be very clear that Tamika Mallory was never, she's a member of the work that needs to be done for Black liberation, but she was never a member of Black Lives Matter. Tamika, I consider a friend, a sister, a comrade. We talk regularly. I texted her this morning. She tried to use her platforms to clarify what was happening. She tried to engage in a way to say, give the real movement people their stuff so we can do this work. So Tamika is not part of this other than continuing to do the work. And I'm grateful that I regularly see Tamika in the streets and on the courthouse steps and lifting her voice. She was just in Atlanta around the murder of Brother Nigel, who was killed inside that Fogo de Chao. She's been at the forefront of the fight for justice for Breonna Taylor. So it's important that we know that we're very clear about who's where. So yeah, we talk regularly. We're not in the same formation, but we respect each other's work. And there's many others whose work we respect. I don't know people like Amanda Seals, but I saw her at the protest last week, right? I know some others. I was at a conference with Linda Sarsour a couple weeks ago. And so what we're all committed to, those who are moving for, one of my spiritual guides always says that there's people who are in this work for the mission, and there's people who are in the work for the money, right? So the people who are in the work for the mission, what we're committed to doing is moving forward, whether we have money or not, right? Baba Matulu Shakur used to say straight ahead, right? So straight ahead, like Matulu said, right? We're gonna keep moving forward and struggling for justice, whether we have all the money in the world or not a penny. We're gonna move forward.
Now, I know that one of the issues on the platform is reparations. Reparations, this issue in particular, has become more popular this presidential election than previous ones, if I remember correctly, because I don't remember this discussion being as big in 2020 or in 2016. But now I do hear more candidates talking about it and having it as a part of their platform. And I want to hear from you a little bit about that. I know that you obviously support reparations. I want you to explain to people what that means to you. What does reparations look like to you?
Reparations is a basic concept in international law that when a people are harmed, there needs to be a repair of the damage. That's a basic concept. And Black people have been harmed. We've been harmed through chattel slavery. We've been harmed through Jim Crow. We've been harmed through the first wave of lynching. We've been harmed through the prison industrial complex. We've been harmed through redlining. And I could continue until we don't have any more time to talk. So reparations absolutely is owed. Randall Robinson wrote this book called The Debt. Right. And we need to understand that reparations is a debt that's owed to Black people. We're not trying to get something that we don't, that's not owed to us. It's owed to us. And reparations needs to be substantive. And so what I see happening, you're absolutely right that they haven't talked enough about reparations up until now. And they're still not talking enough about it. And I believe that Joe Biden thought he could skirt the issue of reparations by saying you can have a holiday that we already celebrated, didn't need his permission to celebrate Juneteenth, right? You can have the Juneteenth holiday, but we're not talking about reparations. But Dr. West and I are talking about reparations, and we're talking about real reparations, which requires cash payment, which requires that some dollars be spent to repair the damage. In Los Angeles County, they passed a reparations ordinance that's free parking at county-owned beaches and parks on Juneteenth. I'll take the free parking, but that doesn't cover the generational wealth that was stolen.
What do you say about some of these programs that are, like, for example, California? I think they just passed legislation that says they're going to donate $12 million to study reparations. What do you think about some of these programs that are basically bypassing the let's give cash reparations to descendants of slavery and focus more so on let's study it and let's implement social programs?
So there's some brilliant people on that reparations task force in California. So when I think about people like Dr. Cheryl Grills, who's on that task force out of Loyola Marymount University, we need to understand that the study of reparations is important as we figure out what cash payment should look like, what real reparations should look like, what in addition to cash needs to be provided. And so I'm not anti-study. I'm anti-study, and that's it. I'm anti-study, produce a report, and walk away, right? And so I think that we absolutely need to convene at the federal level, federal commissions to study what real reparations needs to look like nationally. And that includes, again, I mentioned cash, but it includes cash reparations. It includes policy change and many, many other things.
So when I hear there should be a reparations study, I always refer people back to Dr. Sandy Darity, because the study has already been done. The research is already there. And I think he has a great book about this called From Here to Equality that people should read, so you can see the data that he actually produced in that book. Because a lot of people say, like, well, how much money is needed and who would get what and all that kind of stuff. Like, the research has already been done. So when I hear organizations or groups say, let's donate this money to study it, I see that as a stalling tactic, because I know that the research has already been done. Meanwhile, I do see other groups have received some form of cash payment reparations, particularly in this country, whether it was the Japanese Americans that were part of the internment camps, whether it was more recently, there have been reparations that have been paid to Holocaust survivors under Governor Hochul. So these are things that have continued over the years. And it's interesting because, like I said before, like when it's other groups, they don't need to donate money to do a study. They're like, oh, no, we have the research. It's already there. But I do feel like when it comes to descendants of slavery, there's all these excuses as to why you can't do it.
Right. So I'm not saying, again, study and then leave it there. I'm saying that part of a commission would be assembling all of the studies, like you said, that have already been done, assembling that data and making sure that that informs the policies that are developed and what cash reparations looks like. And it should not take very long, right? It shouldn't take an entire term in office for that to happen. And in fact, Dr. West and I this morning were developing what would the first 100 days look like. And part of the first 100 days is absolutely the development of a commission so that we can move policy forward very, very quickly around reparations.
So when Dr. West was here, I think the first time after he announced his campaign, I did tell him when I looked at his policy platform on his website, I did tell him, when people hear you want to create a commission, again, I do think that is a stalling tactic, because the thing is again, the research has already been done. Like Governor Hochul in New York didn't say, let me do a little bit of research before I give more cash payments to Holocaust survivors. She just did it. She just gave them the money. And what I worry about is when I hear about these commissions and these studies, I worry again that that's just going to be it's going to take time. There's going to be stalling. And in the end, I feel like we're not going to get what we're fully owed anyway.
Well, here's what we need then, because we have to be, I believe in the quick payment, the expedited payment of reparations. We've been owed reparations for more than 150 years. Really, if we go back to the beginning of enslavement, right, for many hundreds of years, right? We've been owed this. This is a debt. Again, this is a debt that's owed. I'm not saying we need a commission to study it for 4 years, right? Or 8 years, right? I'm not saying that. I think that you need a mechanism to move it. And sometimes we have to develop bodies. It doesn't need to be called a commission. It can be called whatever we want to call it. And I think what you're pointing out is that it also has to be done in coordination with organizers who are committed to this on the ground. It can't be government by itself doing that, because that's where I think you get the stalling and not much movement, is that when you do it in coordination with those who are actually moving work, then the work seems to move much more quickly. And I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid. There's people who are afraid of working in partnership with organizers. I'm not afraid. Then there's more of us. Then the other side got to get back a little bit, right? Because we all coming for it.
Who do you think should receive? This is another big topic of discussion. I've had a number of reparations activists on the show. Who do you think should receive reparations in the United States?
So that's a much longer discussion. And sometimes I get hit by ADOS folks because I'm a Pan-Africanist. And I am a Pan-Africanist. And that means to me that all of our struggles are connected. Now, my heritage is that my great, 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 great grandmother is Grandma Rachel, who was brought into Sabine Pass, Texas, in the last shipment, we believe the last shipment of illegally imported enslaved people. So after the slave trade ended, but slavery was still, chattel slavery was still legal, my grandmother was on that ship, right? My whose middle name, I carry her name as my middle name, Rachel. So I am a direct descendant, right? I think that's important. It's important to understand the specific ways in which Black people who descend from lines like mine have been impacted. It's also important to recognize that the harms endured by Black people are shared by Black people, whether you came in, so I guess I'm sixth generation, right? Whether you came in 6 generations ago or you came in 6 months ago, you still experience harm, right? So when we talk about reparations, not just for chattel slavery, but for Jim Crow, when we say reparations includes the ways in which we're redlined and the ways in which Black women earn so much less than white men, right? All of that requires payment for the harm that we have endured. And so I think that we need to give special consideration and different kind of levels of payment. But I think that it is not conducive to the fight for Black freedom for Black people. I've seen some of it descend into, well, you came from Jamaica. You really not, African American, so you shouldn't get anything, right? And I think that that is not conducive. And I think that we need to demonstrate greater solidarity than that.
Well, I think it points to the legality of the situation, because legally, you can't give reparations to all Black people. It has to be based on status. It would have to be based on that lineage, the people who, like yourself, you are a descendant of slavery. And that's because of the 14th Amendment. We actually just saw a case in Evanston, Illinois, where they tried to do just that. They tried to give it to everyone that was Black, and the court came in and they overturned it. I think that was more like a housing initiative anyway. But that's the problem that you will run into. I actually have just had this conversation on the show recently with Judge Joe Brown, which we don't agree on a lot of things, but we do agree on reparations. And he was explaining to me how this needs to be done in a legal way. And so the problem that you run into is, and I'm not saying that those groups don't deserve reparations, but I think they would have to seek it from other countries. I think that people are from Haiti, for example, they would have to seek reparations from France. It's interesting because Haiti paid reparations to France, but France needs to pay reparations to Haiti. But I think that's what you run into, is that if you say, I'm going to give cash reparations to all Black people, which would include those that are Black immigrants as well, the Supreme Court is going to overturn it because of the 14th Amendment, because you can't base it on race. This was actually Clarence Thomas was actually involved in this. He was the one that changed it so that it had to be freed men. So I think that's the struggle that you'll run into if you want to give it to everybody.
I think you're going to run into that struggle whether you want to give it to everybody or you want to give it to one person, that the Supreme Court is going to be a block anyway. So we have to be much, much more creative and, I believe, expansive in our thinking, that we can't pretend like, well, this is legal, so this is how it'll go. No, they set up these legal systems in order to make sure we're not paid reparations, in order to make sure you don't get $2, right? And so I think that we're probably pretty, we got to be pretty clear on what we're facing at every turn, regardless if you include everybody or you keep it narrow. I think that we're going to face that fight. And I mean, even with the free parking that I mentioned in LA County, it was supposed to be free parking for Black people on Juneteenth, and already it just passed like a week or two ago, right before Juneteenth. And already they're going, okay, guess we got to make it free parking for everybody on Juneteenth, right? We're going to face it everywhere we turn, and we're going to have to decide how we want to fight.
Good question here from Roger to expand on this. Do you believe Blacks who are not African American or American freedmen, should be part of our reparations claim is the question. It's a good question.
So I think that's the question we were just addressing. And I think that, again, reparations, I know reparations is not just about chattel slavery. Reparations is about everything that descends from chattel slavery as well. So that said, I think that we have to figure out how to particularize the experiences that families like mine have had, while also recognizing that all Black people suffer harm under these systems.
But I don't think we have the same struggle, though. We don't have the same issues, because there are certain benefits that are given to immigrants that come to the US that are not given to Black Americans that are born here.
So I'm saying there are particularities. I think a lot of it, we do experience the same thing. So if we talk about targeting and violence by the police, right? I don't think they didn't know Patrick Lyoya was from Liberia, right? They just saw a Black man, right? They don't say, are you from Jamaica or are you from the United States, right? And so I think that when we talk about it, it's really important to understand both the particularities, but also when you say we don't face the same struggles, we have some of the same struggles because of how we experience these institutions.
I agree with you on the policing one. I disagree with you on the other issues, just because, and I've seen this as well from my personal experience. I don't feel like we go through the same things, but I do agree with you with the policing issue. But I just think that there needs to be a separate claim for descendants of slavery, and there needs to be a separate claim for those that have immigrated here but have gone through some of those same issues. Because again, I have seen the difference of the benefits that are given to those two Black people that are born in this country and Black immigrants that come to the country. And again, this is not to say they shouldn't get reparations. I think they should get reparations, but I don't think it should come from the United States government. A lot of people from those particular groups came here after a lot of the harm was already done. And we actually made it possible for those groups to be able to come here. And this is something that, I was educated on this because like people had to educate me about this, because I used to say the same thing, that all Black people should get it. But then like when I was educated more about this and people explained to me what would happen with the Supreme Court, and I looked at the law and what would happen, how the differences of how groups are treated in this country and some of the benefits that they do get that we do not get, I don't think they should be a part of the same claim. That's just where I disagree on that. But what is next? What's next for Dr. West's campaign? Any big events coming up?
Lots of big events coming up. So we just again sat with the North Carolina Justice for All Party, and you're the first to hear that we are their official nominees. So we're really excited about that. Lots moving in terms of trying to gain ballot access. We have 7 days left in the state of California, which is both of our home state. We both live in California, and the hurdle is really, really high, that we have to get 73,000 Californians to re-register to vote under the Justice for All Party, and they are not making it easy because the Secretary of State, who actually is a proponent of reparations, who you may have heard of, Dr. Shirley Weber, is our Secretary of State. So we're trying to tap in with her and say, can we at least have some numbers? How many people have re-registered so far? We have no idea. And so we're moving every day like there's nobody registered, because the hurdle is so high. 73,000 have to re-register. And it's a really clunky process, and there's no accountability in that process. So we're moving forward there. We're looking forward to also figuring out how we advance, again, our vision, especially in contrast to the BS that you heard last night from both the Democratic and Republican parties, right? That was, I'm sick. I'm sick. I'm sick that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, were jockeying for positions with police associations. We're saying, no, I've done more for police. No, I've done more for police. Jockeying for positions with Netanyahu, saying, I'll give him more weapons. No, I'll give him more weapons, right? And then the only argument it seems like that they had was around golfing, which is rich white man problems. I don't care what your handicap is, Joe Biden. I don't care. I don't care. Can we talk about a livable wage? Nobody talked about working class people And, Dr. West and I want to make sure that there's a $27 an hour federal minimum wage and a right to unionize. Those are the things we should be talking about. And we look forward to advancing those things. We look forward to advancing things. What I love about our campaign is we are unapologetically Black, right? And we know that until Black people get free, nobody is free. And so what that means is if we're going to talk about healthcare justice, we have to talk about medical apartheid. We have to end Black mother mortality and Black infant mortality. Those kinds of things are central to our campaign. And so we appreciate you, Sister Sabrina, for letting us share your platform to make sure that everybody knows. The last thing that I'll say on this question is that, we've been accused last week. We were accused of being broke. And then yesterday we were on a call with a bunch of faith leaders. And Dr. West said, that's true. We're broke as the 10 Commandments, right? The only thing that I know is that, the 10 Commandments broke is different than our broke, right? We don't want to break the 10 Commandments. But I actually see our brokenness as being a badge of honor, right? The reason that we're broke is because we don't take money from PACs. We don't take money from corporations. We take money only from the people, and those are small amounts that are coming in, that we are powered by the people. We are powered by the people. And so I'm saying all that to say that everybody watching, everybody who wonders, how do we get to shake off this narrative of lesser of two evils, because none of us can stomach the idea of voting for either a Joe Biden or a Donald Trump, is that it means that we all have to be in it. All have to be in it. So if you go to CornelWest2024.com, CornelWest2024.com, and I'll say that's Cornel with one L, then you'll see how to volunteer, how to donate, but also how to get us on the ballot in your state. And we intend to be on the ballot in as many states as possible. So that's what's moving. Tomorrow, I get to be with some Black entrepreneurial leaders in Washington to talk about our plans for investing in Black business, including Black farms. And those are the exciting things that I get to do as someone who claimed I would never, ever, ever run for office. And now I'm in this very unconventional run for office.
All right. Dr. Abdullah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Sister Sabrina. Really appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.